I'd like to say thank you so much for your service to our country, because your husband has accused you of infidelity while serving in Iraq. He now doubts paternity of your child. Did indeed cheat on you while serving overseas. You contend she was pregnant too soon after returning home.
I'll be honest, when you're overseas at first, I mean, there's going to be temptations, and there's going to be guys that look good, and there's going to be guys all around. And you're going to see guys, but that doesn't mean that you have to cheat and you have to go outside of your marriage.
Admit that there is temptation.
There's temptation all around, but I didn't cheat. I would have to get in the bunker and for hours and hours. So if there wasn't a time, then I would be in the bunker, and then I would get back to him the next day.
You really tried your best to stay in contact with your husband and to let him know you were being faithful despite the challenges, the danger you were facing overseas.
Yes, I did, Your Honor.
Mr.
This court episode unfolds under the steady authority of Judge Lauren Lake, where two deeply emotional paternity disputes are brought before the bench, each rooted in doubt, fear, and the overwhelming consequences of questioning parentage. The court is not presented as entertainment, but as a place where real people confront life-altering truths on the evidence stage, knowing that once the results are read, nothing will ever be the same. The first case centers on a married couple arriving in court burdened by distance, military service, and suspicion. The wife appears before Judge Lauren Lake as a service member who returned home from deployment overseas, expecting to reunite peacefully with her husband and family. Instead, she faces accusations that strike at the core of her integrity. Her husband stands opposite her, openly admitting that he doubts the paternity of their child. He argues that the timeline of her pregnancy does not make sense, especially considering her long deployment and his own past medical concerns. From the very beginning, the courtroom becomes a space where the relationship between law and justice is tested against emotion and personal insecurity. As proceedings begin, Judge Lauren Lake carefully guides the discussion to establish context. The wife explains what life was like while serving abroad, emphasizing the constant danger, isolation, and discipline expected of military personnel. She insists that despite temptation and stress, she remained faithful and in daily contact with her husband. Her testimony reflects a desire not only to defend herself, but to reclaim dignity. This is not just a legal dispute. It is a matter of character and trust. The court listens as she describes how accusations followed her home, overshadowing her return and turning joy into distress. Her husband, in turn, explains his perspective. He admits that fear and loneliness consumed him while she was deployed. He describes hearing stories about infidelity within military environments and how those stories planted doubt in his mind. He claims that the pregnancy occurred too soon after her return and raises concerns about his own fertility, which intensifies his suspicion. His testimony reveals how insecurity can grow unchecked when fueled by rumor rather than proof. Judge Lauren Lake repeatedly reminds both parties that assumptions cannot replace evidence, especially when a child's future is at stake. To support his doubts, the husband brings forward a witness with military experience. The witness speaks generally about relationships formed during deployment, emphasizing camaraderie and emotional bonds that can develop in high-stress environments. While the testimony is not specific to the wife, it introduces the idea that secrecy and emotional closeness can sometimes blur boundaries. Judge Lauren Lake carefully clarifies that general experiences do not constitute proof, reinforcing the court's commitment to fairness and factual evaluation. This moment highlights the concept of justice in jurisprudence, where speculation must give way to verified truth. As the case progresses, attention shifts to the child at the center of the dispute. Judge Lauren Lake emphasizes that regardless of adult conflict, the child deserves clarity and stability. The courtroom atmosphere becomes tense as the DNA test is introduced. This is the moment many people regret taking, yet also the moment that brings resolution. The results confirm that the husband is, in fact, the biological father. Relief fills the courtroom, and emotions break through restraint. This outcome reinforces a powerful message echoed in many DNA test cheating stories. Doubt can destroy families, but truth can also restore them. The court concludes the case by reminding both parents that trust, once damaged, must be rebuilt with honesty and accountability. The second case begins immediately, shifting the courtroom dynamic while maintaining emotional intensity. A mother enters court seeking confirmation that the man she believes to be her child's father is, indeed, responsible. She claims he has acted as a father figure since birth, but is now denying paternity to avoid legal responsibility, including Supreme Court child support obligations that stem from established parenthood. Her testimony reflects frustration and exhaustion, as she describes raising her child amid constant denial. The alleged father presents a starkly different narrative. He asserts that he has always known the child was not biologically his and claims the mother misled him. He admits to signing the birth certificate, but insists he did so without fully understanding the legal consequences. Judge Lauren Lake addresses this point directly, explaining how acknowledgement of paternity carries serious legal weight under the law. This discussion reflects the adverse inference in Evidence Act principles, where actions taken voluntarily can carry lasting implications. As the testimony unfolds, contradictions emerge. The court hears about shared living arrangements, ongoing intimacy, and conflicting timelines. Judge Lauren Lake navigates these inconsistencies with precision, ensuring that the evidence stage remains focused on facts rather than emotional outbursts. The case becomes a clear example of how the game-changing attorney podcast discussions often highlight real-world misunderstandings of family law and responsibility. The mother expresses confidence in the DNA test, insisting that truth will vindicate her claims. She presents photographs and personal observations, arguing that the child resembles the alleged father. Judge Lauren Lake listens carefully, but reiterates that physical resemblance cannot replace scientific proof. This moment underscores why the court relies on verified testing rather than assumptions, reinforcing lessons often discussed in relationship between law and justice conversations. When the DNA results are finally revealed, the outcome shocks the courtroom. The man is not the biological father. The revelation changes everything for both parents and the child. Judge Lauren Lake addresses the emotional fallout with seriousness, emphasizing that while biology matters, the child's emotional reality cannot be ignored. The court acknowledges the pain caused by years of uncertainty and denial, framing the moment as one that demands responsibility, not celebration. Judge Lauren Lake urges the mother to pursue the truth fully by identifying the biological father, stressing that children deserve clarity about their origins. This guidance echoes themes found in Adoption Stories' full episodes, where identity and truth play crucial roles in personal development. The court concludes by reinforcing that while the truth may hurt, it also opens the door to healing and accountability. Across both cases, the courtroom serves as more than a legal setting. It becomes a place where personal narratives collide with law, where evidence outweighs accusation, and where truth ultimately prevails. These proceedings reflect why so many people turn to platforms like the Truth Changes Everything podcast and Celebrate Recovery testimonies, seeking reassurance that honesty, even when painful, leads to growth. Judge Lauren Lake's role remains consistent throughout, firm, compassionate, and unwavering in her commitment to justice. By the end of this episode, viewers are left with a clear understanding of how deeply paternity questions affect families. The court's decisions illustrate that while DNA tests can feel terrifying, they are often the only path forward. Whether confirming bonds or severing false assumptions, the results force everyone involved to confront reality. In this courtroom, truth is not optional. It is the foundation upon which justice stands. As the courtroom moves deeper into these cases, Judge Lauren Lake continues to frame each dispute not as isolated arguments, but as part of a larger pattern seen repeatedly in family court, where emotion often clouds judgment, and people underestimate how powerfully evidence can reshape their lives. The atmosphere remains serious, because every word spoken carries weight, and every claim made will eventually face the reality of scientific proof. Following the DNA confirmation in the first case, the court pauses to acknowledge the emotional aftermath rather than rushing forward. Judge Lauren Lake addresses both spouses directly, explaining that while the DNA test resolved the legal question, it did not automatically repair the damage caused by doubt. She highlights how people regret taking DNA tests not because of the truth itself, but because of the emotional distance created before the truth is known. The husband's relief is visible, but so is his remorse. He is forced to confront how suspicion, once spoken aloud, becomes impossible to erase completely. The court discusses how accusations made without proof can act as a form of evidence themselves, shaping perceptions and behaviors. Judge Lauren Lake references how, in divorce proceedings, courts often consider patterns of conduct under the evidence stage in divorce case evaluations. Though this case is not a divorce trial, the same principles apply. Repeated doubt, emotional withdrawal, and mistrust can influence future legal outcomes if the relationship continues to deteriorate. This moment reinforces the relationship between law and justice, showing how personal behavior intersects with legal accountability. Attention then returns briefly to the child, whose presence is felt even without being physically in the courtroom. Judge Lauren Lake emphasizes that children are often the silent witnesses in these disputes. They grow up absorbing tension, uncertainty, and unspoken conflict. The court's role, she explains, is to reduce that harm by delivering clarity. This aligns with discussions frequently heard in the Divorce Course podcast, where legal professionals stress that unresolved paternity questions can undermine long-term family stability. With the first case concluded, the court's focus fully shifts back to the second dispute, which continues to unfold with increasing complexity. The mother reiterates her frustration, explaining how denial of paternity has affected her ability to provide consistency for her child. She describes the emotional toll of raising a child while constantly defending the truth of his identity. Judge Lauren Lake listens carefully, acknowledging that repeated denial can feel like a rejection not just of the mother, but of the child himself. The alleged father, however, maintains his position. He argues that signing the birth certificate was a mistake made under emotional pressure and without proper understanding of the law. Judge Lauren Lake addresses this claim by explaining the legal concept behind acknowledgement of paternity, making it clear that ignorance of the law does not erase responsibility. This moment mirrors discussions found in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where legal experts frequently emphasize that casual decisions in emotionally charged moments can have permanent legal consequences. As testimony continues, contradictions between the two parties become more apparent. Timelines shift, details change, and Judge Lauren Lake carefully points out inconsistencies without humiliating either side. Her approach demonstrates judicial balance, allowing each person to speak while steadily guiding the narrative back to verifiable facts. This reinforces the concept of justice in jurisprudence, where fairness depends on impartial evaluation rather than emotional persuasion. The discussion turns to child support obligations, a subject that immediately raises tension. Judge Lauren Lake clarifies that Supreme Court child support principles are designed to protect children, not punish parents. Financial responsibility follows legal parentage, and disputes over biology do not suspend that duty unless proven otherwise. This explanation reframes the issue, showing that the court's concern is not adult conflict, but the welfare of the child. When the DNA results excluding the alleged father are revisited, Judge Lauren Lake addresses the emotional consequences head-on. She explains that while the test resolved the biological question, it introduced a deeper emotional challenge. The child has known this man as a father figure, and that bond does not simply disappear with a piece of paper. This moment echoes themes found in adoption stories' full episodes, where legal truth and emotional truth do not always align neatly. Judge Lauren Lake stresses that truth is still necessary, even when it disrupts established roles. She explains that living in denial prevents growth and healing. The court cannot function on assumptions or half-truths. This statement aligns closely with ideas often discussed in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where confronting painful realities is seen as the first step toward genuine change. The mother is encouraged to take responsibility for identifying the biological father and pursuing clarity for her child. Judge Lauren Lake emphasizes that postponing this truth only transfers confusion to the next generation. The court frames this obligation as moral as well as legal, underscoring how deeply family law is tied to ethical responsibility. Throughout this portion of the proceedings, the courtroom serves as a real-world example of themes explored in the Truth Changes Everything podcast. Each revelation alters how the parties see themselves and each other. Denial gives way to accountability, and certainty replaces speculation. Judge Lauren Lake repeatedly reinforces that the court exists not to shame, but to clarify. As the session progresses, the emotional energy gradually shifts from confrontation to reflection. Both cases illustrate how DNA testing functions as a turning point rather than an endpoint. The results force each individual to reevaluate past behavior and future choices. This is especially evident in how Judge Lauren Lake speaks about co-parenting, urging adults to separate personal grievances from parental responsibility. By this stage, the court has demonstrated how paternity disputes often extend beyond biology into trust, communication, and long-term consequences. The legal system provides answers, but it cannot undo emotional damage caused by prolonged doubt. Judge Lauren Lake's role remains central, bridging law and empathy, ensuring that justice is served without losing sight of humanity. As this segment concludes, the overarching message becomes clear. Truth may arrive through a DNA test, but responsibility begins afterward. Whether confirming or denying paternity, the results demand maturity, honesty, and a commitment to act in the best interest of the child. In this courtroom, justice is not just about who is right, but about what happens next. As the courtroom proceedings draw toward their conclusion, Judge Lauren Lake brings both cases into sharper focus by addressing what happens after the DNA results are revealed. She makes it clear that the court's responsibility does not end with reading the outcome of a test. Instead, the real work begins once the truth is known, because truth carries consequences that reach far beyond the walls of the courtroom. In the first case, now resolved by confirmation of paternity, Judge Lauren Lake speaks directly about accountability within marriage. She explains that while the DNA test restored certainty, it also exposed how fragile trust can be when fear is allowed to replace communication. The husband is reminded that doubt, once introduced, alters the emotional foundation of a relationship. The wife, though vindicated, must still navigate the pain of having her loyalty questioned during a time when she was serving her country and facing danger abroad. This moment reinforces how people regret taking DNA tests, not because of the outcome, but because of the emotional toll created before the truth was revealed. Judge Lauren Lake emphasizes that the court cannot repair emotional wounds, but it can offer clarity. She frames the ruling as an opportunity for the couple to rebuild their relationship with honesty rather than suspicion. The case becomes a clear example of how truth changes everything, not only legally, but personally. It also illustrates how evidence, when properly applied, protects individuals from unfounded accusations and restores dignity. The discussion naturally expands into broader legal principles. Judge Lauren Lake explains that courts operate on facts, not fear. In many divorce proceedings, repeated accusations without proof can influence custody, support, and credibility assessments. This case, though centered on paternity, highlights the importance of restraint and responsibility in how allegations are made. The evidence stage in divorce case, law exists to prevent emotional speculation from becoming legal fact, a principle that echoes throughout family court jurisprudence. Turning again to the second case, Judge Lauren Lake addresses the aftermath of exclusionary DNA results with deliberate seriousness. She acknowledges the shock and disappointment experienced by the mother, who had built her certainty on belief rather than verification. The ruling forces her to confront the reality that certainty without evidence can still be wrong. Judge Lauren Lake explains that this does not make her a villain, but it does require her to accept responsibility for correcting the situation for her child. The alleged father, though proven not to be biologically related, is reminded that his role in the child's life has still been meaningful. Judge Lauren Lake carefully distinguishes between biological fatherhood and emotional fatherhood, clarifying that while the law recognizes biology, the child's emotional experience cannot be dismissed. This distinction mirrors themes often discussed in adoption stories' full episodes, where identity and attachment do not always follow genetic lines. Judge Lauren Lake also addresses the legal consequences surrounding the birth certificate and prior child support involvement. She explains that while DNA results resolve biological questions, prior legal actions carry their own implications. This discussion reinforces why understanding the law matters, a lesson frequently emphasized in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast. Signing legal documents without full comprehension can create obligations that are not easily undone. The court then shifts to the concept of adverse inference in Evidence Act reasoning. Judge Lauren Lake explains that prolonged refusal to seek truth can sometimes be interpreted as avoidance. In this case, delays in testing and inconsistent statements contributed to confusion that ultimately harmed everyone involved, especially the child. The court stresses that early testing, though emotionally difficult, often prevents years of uncertainty and conflict. Throughout this final phase, Judge Lauren Lake consistently returns to one central theme: the child. She reminds both parties that while adults can rationalize their behavior, children experience outcomes, not intentions. The child does not understand legal arguments or courtroom drama. They understand consistency, care, and truth. This perspective reframes the entire dispute, placing responsibility squarely on the adults to act with maturity moving forward. Judge Lauren Lake encourages the mother to actively pursue identification of the biological father, explaining that unresolved identity questions can create long-term emotional challenges. This guidance aligns with principles often discussed in the Divorce Course podcast, where experts stress that unanswered questions in childhood frequently resurface later in life. The court's role, she explains, is to interrupt that cycle by insisting on clarity now rather than postponing it indefinitely. The emotional tone in the courtroom softens as reflection replaces confrontation. Judge Lauren Lake acknowledges that no one enters court hopping for painful truths, but many leave with the opportunity to rebuild their lives on a more honest foundation. She reinforces that the court is not a place for punishment, but for resolution. This message resonates strongly with themes found in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where personal growth begins with accepting uncomfortable realities. As the episode nears its end, Judge Lauren Lake delivers a broader reflection on the concept of justice in jurisprudence. She explains that justice is not simply about enforcing rules, but about balancing fairness, responsibility, and compassion. DNA testing is a powerful tool, but it is only one part of a larger process that demands ethical behavior and accountability from all parties involved. The court also addresses the broader social impact of paternity disputes. Judge Lauren Lake notes that DNA test cheating stories often gain attention because they tap into universal fears of betrayal and uncertainty. However, she cautions that sensationalizing doubt can normalize mistrust. The legal system exists to counter that tendency by grounding decisions in verified evidence rather than rumor or assumption. In closing, Judge Lauren Lake reiterates that Supreme Court child support principles exist to safeguard children's well-being, not to reward or punish adult behavior. Financial responsibility follows legal determination, and emotional responsibility follows moral obligation. Both are essential for a child's stability and development. The final moments of the proceedings underscore the episode's central message. Truth is not optional in matters of family and identity. Whether confirming paternity or excluding it, DNA results force individuals to confront reality and make informed decisions. Judge Lauren Lake leaves the courtroom with a clear directive to all involved: use the truth not as a weapon, but as a foundation for better choices. This courtroom story ultimately reveals how deeply intertwined law and personal lives truly are. The rulings do more than settle disputes. They expose the cost of doubt, the power of evidence, and the necessity of honesty. In every case presented, one lesson remains constant. When it comes to family, delaying the truth only deepens the damage, but facing it creates the possibility for healing, responsibility, and genuine justice.